Picture an island in the Mediterranean, rugged and beautiful. The year is 1769 and the island is Corsica, a land of mountains, olive groves and proud independence. Only recently had it been brought under French control, and the spirit of resistance still ran hot through its people. Among them was a family of modest nobility, the Bonaparte, who carried both pride in their heritage and a growing unease at the loss of Corsican freedom. It was into this world that Napoleon was born, on the 15th of August, in the city of Ajaccio. His mother, Letizia, was strong and resourceful, shaping her children with discipline and resilience. His father, Carlo, was a lawyer and political figure, tied to the Corsican struggle for identity. Their household was not wealthy, but it carried dignity. And from an early age, Napoleon absorbed both the pride of Corsica and the ambition of France. Breathe slowly and imagine the narrow streets of Ajaccio in those years. Stone houses line the road, the smell of bread drifts from ovens, children play in the dust. Beyond the town, mountains rise sharply and the sea glitters in the sun. Here, the young Napoleon ran with his brothers and sisters, barefoot, wild, dreaming already of greatness. From childhood, he was different. Small in stature, sharp in mind, with a fiery temper that often erupted, he seemed restless, unable to accept the limits of his world. He loved stories of heroes, of Alexander, of Hannibal, of Caesar. He saw himself not as a Corsican boy, but as a figure destined for something larger. When he was 9, his father secured him a place at a French military school. It was a great opportunity, but also a harsh uprooting. Napoleon left his island, his family, his native tongue, and entered a world where he was seen as an outsider. His Corsican accent was mocked, his manners called rough, his pride dismissed. He was lonely, isolated, often teased. But within him burned a determination stronger than the laughter of others. Breathe deeply and picture the cold stone halls of the school in Brienne, northern France. Snow falls outside, children in uniforms march across the courtyard. Inside, the young Napoleon bends over his books, studying mathematics, history, and military theory. He speaks little, but his eyes are sharp, his mind quick. While others play, he imagines battles, draws maps, dreams of campaigns yet to come. He excelled in mathematics, a subject that would serve him well as an artillery officer. He read voraciously, devouring Rousseau, Plutarch, and the classics. He dreamed not only of soldiering, but of reshaping nations, of carving his name into history. At Brienne, he learned discipline, endurance, and solitude. He had few friends, but those he made, he kept. He learned to endure mockery, to hide his feelings, to harden himself against the cruelty of others. The small Corsican boy grew into a young man of steel will, his ambition sharpening with every slight at 16. He graduated and entered the École Militaire in Paris, the most prestigious military academy in France. There, surrounded by the sons of France's elite, he again stood apart. His uniform was patched, his accent mocked, his family's poverty plain. Yet his skill in mathematics and artillery set him apart. He studied tirelessly, finishing in 1 year what usually took 2. By 17, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant of artillery. Breathe slowly and imagine him now, a teenager in the uniform of an officer, standing proudly with his sword at his side. His face is young, but his eyes are already old, burning with determination. He is no longer just the boy from Corsica. He is an officer of France, yet his heart remained divided. He loved Corsica deeply, saw himself as a son of its struggle. When revolution began to stir in France, Napoleon aligned himself at first with Corsican independence. He returned home, involved himself in politics and clashed with rivals. But soon Corsica's hopes crumbled, and Napoleon's ambitions shifted. He realized that his future lay not on the small island, but in the vast theater of France. The revolution was coming. The old monarchy trembled, the streets of Paris boiled with unrest, the very foundation of France shook. And into this storm would step Napoleon Bonaparte, the young artillery officer with the heart of fire. Breathe deeply and let the image of the young Napoleon settle in your mind. A boy mocked for his accent, hardened by solitude, shaped by discipline, standing ready at the edge of history. His journey had only begun. France in 1789 was a nation trembling on the edge of chaos. The revolution had begun, tearing down the ancient monarchy and filling the streets of Paris with cries of liberty, equality, fraternity. The world Napoleon entered as a young officer was one of upheaval, danger, and possibility. For a man of ambition, it was also a world of opportunity. Breathe slowly and imagine Paris in those early revolutionary years. The air is thick with smoke, the streets alive with shouting crowds, the sound of bells and drums echoing through narrow alleys. Bread is scarce, tempers are short, and heads fall beneath the guillotine in the squares. This is the storm into which Napoleon steps, his uniform crisp, his sword polished, his eyes sharp with calculation. At first, Napoleon remained on the fringes, serving quietly as an artillery officer. He was stationed at various garrisons, observing the chaos from a distance. But his mind was restless. He wrote pamphlets supporting the revolution, siding with the Jacobins, the radical faction that pushed for sweeping change. His pen was as sharp as his sword, filled with fiery words about liberty, order, and the destiny of nations. He returned to Corsica during this period, hoping to find his place in the politics of his homeland. For a time, he aligned himself with Pascal Paoli, the Corsican leader who dreamed of independence. But soon their alliance broke. Paoli saw Napoleon as too ambitious, too tied to France. The Bonaparte family was driven from Corsica, their home burned, their ties severed. They fled to France as exiles, their Corsican identity now bound forever to the greater destiny of Napoleon's adopted nation. Breathe deeply and picture the young Napoleon in Marseille, his family around him, their possessions few, their prospects uncertain. Yet even in exile he saw opportunity. France was tearing itself apart, and in the chaos a man of talent could rise. His first true chance came in 1793 during the siege of Toulon. Royalist forces had handed the port city to the British, threatening to give France's enemies a vital foothold on its coast. The revolutionary government sent troops to retake it, and among them was the young artillery captain, Napoleon Bonaparte. At Toulon, he revealed his genius. He studied the terrain, the enemy positions, the weaknesses of the British fleet. He proposed bold artillery strategies, placing cannons on heights that overlooked the harbour. His plan was daring, unconventional, but brilliant. The generals listened, and the young officer was given a chance. Breathe slowly and imagine the thunder of cannons on the hills above Toulon. Smoke drifts across the harbour, the sea glitters in the distance, ships burn and sink beneath the bombardment. Napoleon rides among his gunners, calm and precise, directing fire, inspiring confidence. His tactics succeed. The British fleet withdraws, the city is retaken, and the revolution is saved. For his brilliance at Toulon, Napoleon was promoted to brigadier general at just 24. The boy from Corsica, mocked for his accent, dismissed for his poverty, was now a rising star in the French army. His name began to circulate, his reputation growing. The leaders of the revolution took notice. Yet danger was never far. The revolution devoured its own children. Leaders rose and fell, guillotined in the very squares they once commanded. Napoleon himself was briefly imprisoned, accused of being too close to fallen radicals. For weeks he lingered in uncertainty, his career and his life hanging by a thread. But luck, and perhaps destiny, spared him. He was released and soon returned to service. In 1795, Paris itself erupted in revolt. Royalists marched on the government, threatening to seize power. The streets filled with armed mobs, the fate of the revolution hanging in the balance. The government turned to Napoleon. He acted with ruthless decisiveness. He ordered cannon to be loaded with grape shot, deadly sprays of iron that cut through crowds like scythes. As the rebels advanced, he gave the order. The cannons roared, the streets filled with smoke and screams, and within moments, the uprising was broken. A whiff of grape shot, it was called, and it saved the Republic. Breathe deeply and picture the aftermath. The streets of Paris littered with broken weapons, the smell of powder heavy in the air. The government, shaken but grateful, praised the young general. He was 26 and now a hero of the revolution. From that moment, Napoleon's star blazed across France. He was given command of the army of Italy, a post many considered a burden. The army was ragged, poorly supplied, demoralized. But Napoleon saw not despair, but opportunity. With these men, he would begin the campaigns that would make him a legend. Imagine him now, addressing his troops for the first time. His voice is steady, his eyes bright with conviction. Soldiers, you are hungry and naked. The government owes you much, but can give you nothing. I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world. Rich provinces, great cities, all shall be at your disposal. Soldiers, with courage, perseverance, and unity, you will win glory, and wealth shall follow. The men, ragged though they were, believed him. His words lit fire in their hearts. They would follow him through mountains and rivers, through mud and blood, for they saw in him something greater than themselves. The boy from Corsica was no longer an outsider. He was now the rising general of France, a man whose victories would soon reshape Europe. Breathe slowly and let the image of Napoleon at Toulon and Paris settle in your mind. The smoke of cannon still lingers, the shouts of soldiers echo, the streets of Paris are quiet once more. The revolution had found its sword, and his name was Napoleon Bonaparte. The legend was beginning to take shape. Breathe slowly and imagine the year 1796. France is exhausted. The revolution has torn the nation apart. Wars rage on every border, and her enemies wait eagerly for her collapse. The government, the Directory, places its hope in generals to keep the Republic alive. And to the army of Italy, battered and starving, they send a young man barely 26 years old. His name? Napoleon Bonaparte. The army of Italy was no prize. Its soldiers were hungry, their clothes in tatters, their weapons dull. Supplies were scarce, morale was low. They were posted in the mountains of northern Italy, facing the Austrian Empire and its allies. Many believed it was a forgotten front, a place for careers to wither. But Napoleon saw something else. He saw opportunity. When he arrived, the soldiers looked at him with skepticism. He was small, pale, with sharp eyes and a Corsican accent. But then he spoke. His words poured like fire. "Soldiers, you are naked and ill-fed. The government owes you much, but can give you nothing. Your patience, your courage are admirable, but they earn you no glory. I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world. There you will find honor, wealth, and comfort. Soldiers of Italy, will you lack courage?" The ragged men cheered. In that moment he won their loyalty. Not by wealth, not by birth, but by vision. They believed him, and belief can turn hunger into strength. Breathe deeply and imagine the mountain passes of northern Italy. Snow clings to peaks, rivers rush through valleys, villages cling to hillsides. Into this land Napoleon led his army, striking with speed and daring that stunned his enemies. His first victories came at Montenotte and Millesimo. He moved swiftly, dividing the forces of Austria and Piedmont, striking them separately, never allowing them to unite. His soldiers marched for days, fighting with ferocity, driven by his relentless pace. Where other generals hesitated, Napoleon attacked. Where others delayed, he seized the moment. In a matter of weeks, he forced the Kingdom of Piedmont to surrender, knocking one enemy out of the war. Then he turned on the Austrians. At Lodi, he faced a river crossing under heavy fire. The Austrian guns swept the bridge, cutting down men as they tried to advance. For a moment, the attack faltered. Then Napoleon himself appeared at the front, urging his men forward. With cries of courage, the French stormed the bridge, cannon fire roaring around them, the air thick with smoke. They broke through, driving the Austrians into retreat. The Bridge of Lodi became legend. His soldiers began to call him Le Petit Caporal, the Little Corporal, for he fought among them, sharing danger, showing courage. In their eyes, he was no distant commander, but one of their own. From that moment, their loyalty was bound to him forever. Breathe slowly and picture him after Lodi, standing with his officers, the Po River glittering behind him. He looks not only at the battlefield, but beyond, into the future. Later, he would say it was at Lodi that he first felt the sense of destiny, that he realized he might one day rule, not just armies, but nations. Victory followed victory. At Castiglione, Arcole, Rivoli, names that rang across Europe, Napoleon defeated larger forces with brilliance and daring. He used speed, deception, and concentration of force, turning weakness into strength. Again and again the Austrians were beaten, their generals baffled by his maneuvers. By the spring of 1797 he marched into Austria itself. The great Habsburg Empire, long an enemy of France, was forced to sue for peace. The Treaty of Campo Formio ended the war, granting France vast territories and recognition of its power, and it was all won by the young general from Corsica. Breathe deeply and imagine the scene. Napoleon, still only 28, sits across from Austrian envoys, maps spread across the table. He negotiates not as a servant of the Directory, but as a master in his own right. He dictates terms, redraws borders, shapes nations. The soldier has become a statesman. Back in France, his fame blazed. Pamphlets praised him, newspapers sang his glory. The people whispered his name with awe. He was the hero of the Republic, the conqueror of Italy, the man who had brought both honor and riches to a weary nation. But with fame came unease. The Directory feared him. They saw his popularity, his charisma, his hold over soldiers. They feared that he might one day turn his army against them. And perhaps, in the quiet of his mind, Napoleon already dreamed of more. Still for now, he returned to Paris, a hero. Crowds lined the streets, cheering, tossing laurel leaves before him. He was small, modest in manner, but his presence filled the air. To the people, he was not just a general, he was the future. Breathe slowly and let the image settle. The Italian plains behind him, victories carved into memory, treaties signed, nations reshaped. A boy who once walked the streets of Ajaccio barefoot now stood as Europe's rising star. Yet this was only the beginning. Ahead lay Egypt, pyramids and deserts, victories and defeats, and the creation of a legend that would echo for centuries. The world was beginning to whisper his name, Napoleon. Breathe slowly and imagine Paris in 1798. The streets are filled with whispers of the young general who has conquered Italy, humbled Austria, and dazzled Europe. Napoleon Bonaparte is only 29, but already his name glows like fire. The people love him. The Directory fears him. He is too popular, too powerful, too dangerous to leave idle in Paris. And so, they give him a mission that will take him far from France, far across the Mediterranean, into the ancient land of Egypt. The plan was bold. By seizing Egypt, France could strike at Britain's trade routes to India, weakening its greatest enemy. But for Napoleon, Egypt was more than strategy. It was a place of legend, the land of pharaohs and pyramids, of Alexander's conquests, of timeless wonder. He dreamed of carving his own empire there, of blending war with discovery, of shaping himself not just as a general, but as a figure of destiny. Breathe deeply and imagine the French fleet sailing across the blue Mediterranean. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, cannons, horses, scientists, engineers, all bound for the desert. Napoleon brought with him not only an army but scholars and artists, men who would study Egypt's monuments, its flora, its people. This was more than war. It was an expedition of science and culture. In July they landed at Alexandria. The sun beat down mercilessly, the air heavy with dust and heat. The soldiers, unaccustomed to such climate, struggled. Yet Napoleon pressed forward. He urged his men to look not at the sand, but at history. "Soldiers," he declared before the looming pyramids, "from the heights of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you." His words gave them courage. They marched into battle, facing the Mamluks, fierce horsemen who ruled Egypt with speed and steel. At the Battle of the Pyramids, Napoleon displayed his genius. He formed his troops into great squares, bristling with bayonets, their cannons at the corners. The Mamluk cavalry charged, waves of horsemen sweeping across the desert. But the squares held. Volley after volley thundered, the air filled with smoke, the ground littered with fallen riders. By day's end, the French had triumphed. Egypt was theirs. Breathe slowly and picture the battlefield, pyramids rising in the distance, the Nile flowing nearby, the sun sinking red over the desert. The French soldiers, exhausted but exultant, looked to their general with awe. He has given them victory in a land where Alexander once marched. The legend of Napoleon grows, yet even legends face shadows. Weeks later, at Aboukir Bay, the French fleet lay at anchor, unprepared for the storm that was coming. The British Admiral Horatio Nelson, master of the seas, descended upon them. Cannon thundered through the night as the ships burned and sank, the water aflame with oil and fire. By dawn, the French fleet was shattered. Napoleon and his army were trapped in Egypt, cut off from France. Still, he did not falter. He turned his attention to governing Egypt, reforming administration, studying the land, presenting himself as a liberator rather than a conqueror. He met with scholars, explored ruins, encouraged his scientists to document everything they saw. From this work would come the Description de l'Égypte, a monumental study that revealed ancient wonders to Europe, including the Rosetta Stone, key to unlocking the lost language of hieroglyphs. But Egypt was not easily tamed. The people resisted. Uprisings flared in Cairo, and Napoleon's forces crushed them with ruthless efficiency. Disease spread through the army, the heat and sand wore down the men, and supplies grew scarce. Still, he pressed on, marching into Syria in 1799. There he faced disaster. At Acre, a walled city on the coast, his assault failed again and again. British ships reinforced the defenders, his men fell to plague, and for the first time, Napoleon tasted bitter defeat. He was forced to retreat, his dreams of an Eastern Empire crumbling in the dust. Breathe deeply and imagine him riding back across the desert, the sun beating down, his army weary, wounded, diminished. His gaze is distant, his jaws set. Even in failure, he does not show despair. He tells his men they will be remembered, that their suffering is not in vain. His belief in destiny burns still, unshaken by sand or plague. By 1799, word reached him that France itself was faltering. The Directory was failing, corruption rampant, enemies circling. Napoleon knew his place was not in Egypt, but in Paris. Leaving his army behind, he slipped away, sailing across the Mediterranean in secrecy, evading British patrols, and returning to France. When he stepped ashore, he was not the defeated general of Acre. He was the conqueror of the pyramids, the man who had brought back tales of Egypt's wonders. who carried with him the aura of the exotic, the mysterious, the eternal. The people cheered, the soldiers hailed him, the politicians trembled. He was still young, but already his legend stretched across continents. Breathe slowly and let the image settle. The pyramids stand timeless in the desert. The Nile flows as it always has. The fleet lies shattered at Abukir. The ruins of Acre still smoulder. But Napoleon, the son of Corsica, has returned to France with his legend greater than ever. Ahead lies Paris, a failing government, and an opportunity too great for him to ignore. The boy who once dreamed of greatness now stands on the threshold of power itself. The general is about to become the ruler. Breathe slowly and imagine the shores of France in October 1799. A ship slips quietly into harbour. On board stands a man who has tasted both glory and defeat, who has marched his army past the pyramids and retreated from the walls of Acre. His fleet is gone, his Egyptian dreams in ruins. But when his boots touch French soil, none of this matters. For in the hearts of the people, he is not the man of failure. He is the hero of Italy, the conqueror of Egypt, the name on every lip, Napoleon Bonaparte. France is in turmoil. The Directory, the five-man government that rules the Republic, is collapsing under corruption, inefficiency, and endless wars. The economy falters, enemies circle at the borders, and the people grow restless. In Paris, politicians scheme, generals maneuver, and whispers of change drift through salons and taverns alike. Into this storm walks Napoleon, young, brilliant, untarnished by the squabbles of the Directory. He is exactly what France craves: strength. Breathe deeply and picture Paris as he returns. Crowds gather in the streets, craning their necks to glimpse the general. Women lean from balconies shouting his name. Soldiers cheer, raising their hats as he passes. He is calm, modest in appearance, but his presence is magnetic. To the people, he is salvation. To the politicians, he is a tool, or so they think. Napoleon quickly allies himself with key figures: Emmanuel Sieyès, a cunning politician, and his own brother Lucien, who presides over the Council of 500. Together they plot to overthrow the Directory and replace it with a new government, one strong enough to restore order. The plan unfolds in November, during the month of Brumaire in the revolutionary calendar. The Directory is forced to dissolve and the councils of government are relocated to Saint-Cloud, just outside Paris, under the pretense of a Jacobin uprising. In truth, it is the stage for a coup. Breathe slowly and picture the palace of Saint-Cloud that morning. The air is tense, soldiers march at Napoleon's command, muskets glinting in the weak light. Inside, the deputies of the councils shout and argue, suspicion in their voices. Napoleon enters, his uniform gleaming, his face stern. He speaks of the Republic's peril, of the need for change, of salvation. But his words are met with cries of outrage. The Council of 500 erupts in fury. Deputies surge to their feet, shouting, "Down with the dictator! Outlaw him!" Some rush toward him, fists raised, their voices trembling with rage. For a moment it seems the coup will fail, that Napoleon will be torn apart on the chamber floor. But outside waits loyalty. His brother Lucien rushes forward, declaring that the council is under threat from traitors. Soldiers storm in, bayonets lowered, dispersing the deputies with force. The halls echo with the sound of boots, the cries of protest silenced by steel. By evening, the Directory is no more. A new constitution is proclaimed. Executive power will rest in 3 consuls, but one will stand above the rest. That man is Napoleon Bonaparte. He is only 30, yet he now holds the fate of France in his hands. The revolution, born in fire and blood 10 years before, has ended in his grasp. Breathe deeply and imagine Paris the next day. The streets hum with whispers of what has happened. Some fear dictatorship, others hope for stability. All know that change has come. Posters announce the new constitution. Pamphlets praise Napoleon as the savior of France. He walks through the Tuileries Palace, no longer as general, but as ruler. As first consul, he wastes no time. He reforms administration, centralizes power, and begins to restore order. He negotiates peace with Austria, ending years of war. He reorganizes taxation, creates a strong central bank, and begins the reforms that will shape modern France. His touch is everywhere, firm, efficient, unrelenting. Yet even in peace, he prepares for war. Britain remains hostile, its fleet ruling the seas. Napoleon plans invasions, campaigns, strategies. His mind never rests. He works late into the night, dictating letters, reading reports, planning reforms. He is tireless, a force of will wrapped in the body of a man. Breathe slowly, and imagine him at his desk by candlelight. Maps spread before him, ink-stained fingers moving across pages, aides rushing to keep pace with his words. Outside, Paris sleeps, but within the palace, Napoleon is awake, already shaping the dawn. The people feel his presence. For the first time in years, there is order. Bread returns to tables, law returns to streets. The guillotine is silent. France breathes again. And yet, beneath the calm, the foundations of a new kind of rule are being laid, not of liberty or equality, but of one man's vision. In 1800 he marches again, crossing the Alps to strike at Austria once more. His army trudges through snow and ice, shivering, hungry, but driven by his will. At Marengo he faces near disaster, his forces pushed to the brink. But at the last moment reinforcements arrive, and he seizes victory. France hails him again as its savior. By the year's end his position is unshakable. He is first consul, but in truth, he is more. The revolution has ended, the Republic is a shadow, and Napoleon Bonaparte stands as the master of France. Breathe deeply and let the image settle. The young Corsican who once dreamed of greatness now walks the halls of power, his boots echoing on marble floors. Behind him lie Italy, Egypt, and Brumaire. Ahead lies a throne, a crown, an empire. The general has become the ruler. The next step will make him emperor. Breathe slowly and picture Paris in the year 1804. The streets are brighter now, more orderly, more alive than in the days of the Revolution. The guillotine no longer dominates the squares. The economy recovers, laws are enforced, schools flourish, and at the center of it all stands Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who has brought stability where there was once only chaos. For 5 years, he has ruled as first consul, his power growing with each reform, each victory. He has restructured government, centralized authority, established a modern system of taxation, founded the Bank of France, and restored the Catholic Church through a concordat with the Pope. He has reformed education, creating lycées to train a new generation of citizens. Above all, he has given France a new legal foundation, the Civil Code, later called the Napoleonic Code, a body of law that enshrined equality before the law, the abolition of feudal privileges, and protection of property. Breathe deeply and imagine him dictating the code to jurists. His voice is sharp, insistent, pushing them toward clarity and order. Laws must be simple, he says, so that every peasant can understand them. His words will outlast battles for the Napoleonic Code, spreads across Europe, shaping legal systems for centuries. But laws and reforms are not enough. Napoleon hungers for more. In his heart, he does not see himself merely as the restorer of the Republic. He sees himself as the founder of a new dynasty, a ruler destined to be crowned. And so in May of 1804, the Senate declares him Emperor of the French. Breathe slowly and picture the grand ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral in December of that year. The church glitters with candlelight, banners hang from vaulted arches, the organ thunders. Crowds press outside, straining to glimpse history. Inside, Napoleon and Josephine walk down the aisle, their robes heavy with gold and crimson. The Pope himself has come to crown him. But in the moment of climax, Napoleon does something no one expects. As the Pope raises the crown, Napoleon takes it in his own hands, lifts it high, and places it on his own head. The message is clear. He owes his power to no one, not even the church. He crowns himself emperor, master of his destiny. Then he crowns Josephine as empress, sealing their union in splendor. The crowd erupts in cheers. Outside, cannons thunder, bells toll, Paris rejoices. The boy from Corsica has become Emperor of France. Breathe deeply and imagine Paris that night. The city glows with torches, fireworks burst above the Seine, music drifts through the streets. People speak in awe. Napoleon the Emperor. Some feel pride, others unease, but all know they are witnessing the birth of a new age. As Emperor, Napoleon does not rest. He expands his reforms. He reorganizes the nobility, creating new titles for men who serve him loyally. He fills his court with splendor, reviving rituals of monarchy, yet always grounded in merit. His generals, his ministers, his family rise not by birth, but by service to him. He is both monarch and revolutionary, blending the old with the new. He continues to wage war, for Europe cannot ignore his rise. Austria, Russia, Britain, Prussia, all fear the new emperor. They form coalitions, desperate to contain him, but Napoleon meets them on the battlefield with the same brilliance he showed in Italy. At Austerlitz in 1805, he wins perhaps his greatest victory. Facing the combined armies of Austria and Russia, he lures them into overextending, then crushes them with precision. The battlefield shimmers with fog and sunlight, the sun of Austerlitz shining down on his triumph. The enemy is shattered, the Holy Roman Empire dissolves, and Napoleon stands supreme. Breathe slowly and picture him after the battle, standing upon a hill, his cloak billowing in the wind. Below, his soldiers cheer, their bayonets glinting in the light. He speaks to them of glory, of honor, of their place in history. To them he is not just a general, he is a figure of destiny. Back in Paris, news of victory ignites celebration. Plays are written, paintings commissioned, monuments planned. Napoleon's image spreads everywhere, carved in marble, painted on canvas, struck into coins. He is no longer just a man, he is becoming a legend. And yet the seeds of danger are already there. For every victory, a new enemy rises. For every reform, new resentment grows. The more power he takes, the more fragile it becomes. He has crowned himself, but crowns are heavy, and Europe watches, waiting for him to stumble. Still in these years, Napoleon is at his height. He is emperor, lawgiver, conqueror, builder of monuments and institutions. He has remade France, humbled Austria, reshaped Europe. The boy from Corsica now rules as one of the greatest figures the world has ever seen. Breathe deeply and let the image linger. Notre Dame, glowing with candles, the crown upon his head, the cheers of thousands echoing through Paris. The revolution that began with cries of liberty has ended with the coronation of an emperor. But Napoleon is not done. His destiny demands more battles, more victories, more power. Ahead lies Jena, Wagram, Friedland, the great campaigns that will stretch his empire across the continent. The star of Napoleon burns bright, but even stars that blaze the brightest cast the deepest shadows. Breathe slowly and imagine Europe in the years after Austerlitz. Thrones tremble, kings whisper in fear, and armies march at the sound of Napoleon's name. The Austrian Empire is humbled, Russia retreats, and the Holy Roman Empire, ancient for centuries, is dissolved into dust. Napoleon now shapes Europe as if it were clay beneath his hands, but new enemies rise. Prussia, proud and once powerful, cannot tolerate his dominance. In 1806 it marches to war, its generals confident of victory, its armies marching with the memory of Frederick the Great. Napoleon meets them at Jena and Austerlitz. The Prussians expect slow maneuvers, the grinding pace of old wars. But Napoleon moves with lightning. His columns surge across the countryside, striking where they are least expected. At Jena, French forces sweep aside the Prussian army with precision and fury. At Austerlitz, Davout, one of Napoleon's most brilliant marshals, defeats a larger force with discipline and brilliance. Breathe deeply and picture the battlefield at Jena. Morning mist rises. Drums roll, the French eagles glint in the light. The Prussian lines waver under the thunder of cannon, the cries of cavalry, the relentless advance of French columns. By nightfall, Prussia is broken. Within weeks, its capital, Berlin, falls. The proud kingdom lies crushed at Napoleon's feet. Napoleon enters Berlin in triumph. He visits the tomb of Frederick the Great, standing in silence before the resting place of a king he respects. Then he issues the Berlin Decree, beginning the continental system, a blockade designed to strangle Britain's trade by shutting it out of Europe. But Britain remains defiant. Its navy under Nelson still rules the seas. At Trafalgar in 1805, the French and Spanish fleets had been shattered. Napoleon controls the land, but Britain controls the water. The struggle between them becomes a duel of giants. France dominating Europe, Britain ruling the waves. Meanwhile, Russia still resists. In 1807, Napoleon marches east, meeting the Russian army at Friedland. The battle is fierce, fought among rivers and woods, but Napoleon strikes with devastating force. The Russian lines collapse, their retreat chaotic. Tsar Alexander is forced to sue for peace. Breathe slowly and picture the meeting on the River Niemen. A great raft is built, floating between the French and Russian camps. There, in the middle of the river, Napoleon and Alexander meet face to face. Two emperors, young and ambitious, clasp hands. They agree to the Treaty of Tilsit. Europe is divided between them like a map upon a table. For now, they are allies. Napoleon returns to Paris at the height of his power. His empire stretches from Spain to Poland, from the North Sea to the Adriatic. Brothers and marshals are placed on thrones. Joseph in Naples, Louis in Holland, Jerome in Westphalia. The Confederation of the Rhine unites German states under his protection. Europe is reordered by his will. Breathe deeply and imagine Paris in these years. Monuments rise, palaces gleam, the streets hum with prosperity. Soldiers parade beneath the Arc de Triomphe. The people cheer their emperor. Paintings depict him as a new Caesar, a new Charlemagne. His image is everywhere, on coins, in classrooms, in the very rhythm of daily life. Yet beneath the triumph, shadows gather. The continental system strains economies and smuggling flourishes. Britain grows richer through trade with the wider world, while Europe struggles. Spain, placed under his brother Joseph, erupts in revolt. Guerrilla fighters, priests, peasants, soldiers, an entire nation resists with fire and blade. Napoleon calls it a Spanish ulcer, a wound that bleeds his empire slowly but endlessly. At the same time, Austria rises again. In 1809, it challenges Napoleon once more. At Aspern-Essling, on the banks of the Danube, Napoleon suffers his first major defeat in a set-piece battle. His troops, cut off by the river, are driven back. For the first time, Europe breathes, believing the emperor can be beaten. But Napoleon rallies. Weeks later, at Wagram, he brings his full might to bear. Cannons roar across the plain, cavalry charge, infantry grind forward. It is a brutal, bloody battle, tens of thousands dead, but in the end Napoleon triumphs. Austria is forced to submit again. Breathe slowly and picture him standing on the battlefield of Wagram, the smoke clearing, the cries of the wounded drifting on the wind. His face is calm, but his eyes are weary. He has won, but at great cost. Victory is his constant companion, but it grows heavier with each campaign. In these years, Napoleon's personal life shifts as well. His marriage to Josephine, once filled with passion, falters. She has given him love but no heir. In 1810 he divorces her, a painful but calculated choice, and marries Marie-Louise, daughter of the Austrian emperor. The union shocks Europe. Austria, once his enemy, is now bound to him by blood. Soon a son is born, the King of Rome. Napoleon at last has an heir, and his dynasty seems secure. Breathe deeply and imagine him holding the child in his arms, the halls of the Tuileries echoing with celebration. For a moment, the conqueror seems simply a father, smiling softly, the weight of empire momentarily forgotten. Yet destiny does not rest. Napoleon stands at the height of his power, but the higher one climbs, the steeper the fall. His empire stretches wide, but it strains under its own weight. Britain resists, Spain bleeds him, and Russia, his uneasy ally, grows restless. For now, though, the star still burns brightly. Napoleon, Emperor of the French, master of Europe, lawgiver, conqueror, father, stands as one of the most powerful men the world has ever known. Breathe slowly and let the image linger. The raft on the Niemen, the streets of Paris alive with glory, the cannons of Wagram thundering into silence. The emperor's shadow stretches across a continent, but ahead lies Russia, snow and fire, retreat and ruin. The beginning of the end awaits. Breathe slowly and imagine Europe in 1810. Napoleon's empire stretches wider than ever before. France rules from the Atlantic coast to the Vistula River, from the North Sea to the mountains of Italy. Brothers, marshals, and allies sit on thrones created by his hand. His heir, the King of Rome, rests in the cradle of Paris. To many, it seems nothing can shake his power, and yet, within the brilliance, cracks begin to show. The continental system. Napoleon's great economic weapon was meant to bring Britain to its knees. By closing the ports of Europe to British goods, he hoped to starve the island nation into submission. But Britain, with its powerful navy, simply expanded trade across the world, to India, to the Americas, to distant seas. Meanwhile, Europe groaned under blockade. Smuggling flourished, economies staggered, and resentment grew. The system, designed to weaken Britain, began instead to weaken Napoleon's allies. Spain became his greatest wound. In 1808 he placed his brother Joseph on the Spanish throne, believing the country would bow to his will. Instead, Spain erupted in fury. Priests called for holy war, peasants took up muskets, and guerrilla fighters struck French patrols from hills and villages. In Madrid, uprisings were met with brutal repression, immortalized in Goya's paintings of executions. Breathe deeply and picture the dusty roads of Spain. French columns march, their drums beating, their eagles flying. But from the hills, shots ring out. A patrol vanishes in the night. Supply wagons burn. Every village hides enemies. It is not a war of grand battles, but of endless bleeding. Napoleon himself defeats Spanish and British forces at times, but when he leaves, the fires return. The Spanish ulcer, he calls it, a wound that never heals. Meanwhile, in the east, Russia grows restless. Tsar Alexander, once Napoleon's ally at Tilsit, resents the continental system. Russia's economy suffers, its nobles grumble, and its pride chafes under French dominance. Quietly, Alexander pulls away, reopening trade with Britain, preparing for confrontation. Napoleon, ever ambitious, cannot let this stand. In 1812, he gathers the greatest army Europe has ever seen, the Grande Armée. Over 600,000 men from every corner of his empire, French, Poles, Italians, Germans, Dutch. They march east, banners gleaming, drums rolling, the air alive with anticipation. Breathe slowly and imagine the columns stretching for miles, rivers of men and horses, wagons and cannons pouring across the plains. Villages empty as they pass, fields trampled underfoot. The scale is staggering, a moving city of war. They cross into Russia expecting swift battle, swift victory, but the Russians refuse to fight. They retreat, burning villages and fields, leaving nothing for the invaders. The French march deeper, supplies dwindling, the summer heat heavy on their backs. Morale falters, but Napoleon presses on. He believes one great battle will decide everything. At last, near Moscow, the Russians stand at Borodino. The battle is a storm of fire and steel, one of the bloodiest of the age. Cannons roar, musket volleys thunder, cavalry clash in clouds of dust. The French attack again and again, the Russians resist with desperate fury. By nightfall, the field is a sea of corpses, tens of thousands dead. Napoleon holds the field, but it is a victory without triumph. The Russian army survives, retreating still. Breathe deeply and picture Napoleon entering Moscow. The city is silent, deserted, its streets empty. Then flames erupt. The Russians have set it alight, leaving the conqueror only ashes. Napoleon waits weeks, hoping for peace, for a message from the Tsar. None comes. Winter creeps in, the cold sharpening, the snow beginning to fall. At last, he orders retreat. The retreat from Moscow is one of history's great tragedies. Snow swirls, the temperature plummets, men freeze in their rags. Horses collapse in the snow, wagons abandoned, cannons left behind. Wolves howl at the edges of the columns. Starvation grips them. Men eat their horses, their belts, even each other. The Grande Armée, once a force of 600,000, disintegrates in the icy wilderness. At the Berezina River, disaster strikes again. Bridges collapse under the press of desperate men, drowning thousands in icy water. The Russians harry the retreat, striking at the shattered remnants. Only a fraction of the army makes it back. Breathe slowly and imagine Napoleon, wrapped in his cloak, riding among the survivors. His face is drawn, his eyes shadowed. He speaks little, his presence alone keeping some shred of order. He knows the dream has ended. The greatest army in Europe lies broken in the snow. By the time he returns to Paris, fewer than 100,000 of the Grande Armée remain. The rest are dead, frozen, or captured. The invincible emperor is no longer invincible. Across Europe, his enemies stir. Prussia, Austria, Russia, Britain. Once cowed, now they rise, sensing his weakness. The star that once blazed so bright begins to flicker. The emperor has reached too far. The snows of Russia mark the turning point. Breathe deeply and let the image settle. Moscow, burning, the endless white of the Russian winter, the shattered columns of men stumbling through the snow. The boy from Corsica, the conqueror of Austerlitz, now rides at the head of ghosts. The fall has begun. Breathe slowly. And imagine Europe in 1813. The snow of Russia has melted, but the memory remains. The Grande Armée, once 600,000 strong, is gone, swallowed by cold, hunger, and war. Napoleon has returned to Paris, alive but diminished, his empire trembling, yet his will is unbroken. With relentless energy, he raises new armies, calling on boys barely old enough to hold a musket, men too old to march. Cannons are forged, uniforms stitched, drums beaten once more. France staggers, but under Napoleon's command, it still stands. The Allies gather: Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Britain. Old enemies, united by one purpose: to bring down the Emperor. Their armies swell, their resolve hardened by years of war. Europe itself seems to rise against him. Breathe deeply and picture the plains of Saxony, where Napoleon fights desperate battles to hold back the tide. At Lutzen and Bautzen he snatches victories still, his genius undimmed. But his foes learn. They avoid direct battle, harass his supply lines, wear him down with numbers. He is no longer the unstoppable force of Austerlitz. His armies bleed, his strength wanes. In October 1813 at Leipzig, the Battle of Nations erupts, the largest battle Europe has ever seen. Nearly 500,000 men clash, cannon fire shaking the earth, musket smoke blanketing the fields. Napoleon's army fights with courage, but the Allies' numbers are overwhelming. German states, once loyal to him, turn against him mid-battle, their troops wheeling around to fire on their former master. Breathe slowly and imagine the chaos: bridges collapsing, men drowning in rivers, the cries of wounded filling the air. Napoleon retreats, his aura of invincibility shattered. For the first time, the Emperor is truly beaten. By 1814, the Allies invade France itself. Cities fall, the countryside trembles, Paris quakes. Still, Napoleon fights on. With brilliance and speed, he wins small battles, darting across the map, defeating larger forces with daring maneuvers. His soldiers call him the ogre once more, unstoppable even in desperation. But the numbers are too great, the tide too strong. Paris surrenders. Breathe deeply and picture Napoleon at Fontainebleau, April 1814. His marshals surround him, weary, their loyalty frayed. He tries to rally them, but they are done. The Emperor, master of Europe, signs his abdication. Tears stream down the faces of his soldiers as he bids them farewell. Mounted on horseback before the Imperial Guard, his voice trembles as he speaks. "Soldiers of my old guard, I bid you farewell. For 20 years I have led you on the road to honor and glory. Be faithful to your new sovereign. Do not grieve for my fate. Would I could embrace you all, but I will press you to my heart. Adieu, my children." The guard weeps, their bayonets lowered in sorrow. Napoleon kisses their standards, then departs into exile. They send him to Elba, a small island in the Mediterranean. Once master of Europe, now ruler of a tiny rock. There, he organizes the island with the same energy he gave to France, building roads, reforming administration, inspecting farms. He plays emperor in miniature, but his mind burns with restlessness. Breathe slowly and imagine him standing on Elba's shore, gazing across the sea toward France. He hears rumors. The Bourbon king restored to the throne is weak, unpopular, mistrusted. The people murmur for their emperor. His soldiers, his veterans, still love him. And in his heart, Napoleon knows his story is not yet over. In February 1815, he makes his move. With a small band of followers, he sails across the sea, landing on the coast of France. No army greets him, no cannon salutes him, only the uncertain eyes of villagers. But as he marches inland, soldiers sent to stop him instead join him. Picture the scene. A royalist regiment confronts him. Napoleon steps forward alone, opening his coat, his chest bare. "Here I am," he declares. "Kill your emperor, if you will." Silence falls, and shouts erupt. "Vive l'Empereur!" The soldiers join him, their muskets raised in salute. With each step, his army grows. Breathe deeply and imagine Paris as he enters once more. Crowds surge, shouting his name, tearing down Bourbon flags, raising the tricolour again. In a matter of weeks, without a shot fired, Napoleon is emperor once more. It is the beginning of the 100 days. For a brief, dazzling moment, his star blazes again. He reforms, rallies, prepares for the storm to come. Across Europe, kings and emperors gasp in shock. The ogre has returned from exile. The war begins anew. But even as cheers echo in Paris, the Allies are already gathering. Britain, Prussia, Austria, Russia determined this time to end him forever. The greatest gamble of his life awaits. Breathe slowly, and let the image linger. The old guard weeping at Fontainebleau, the sea wind on Elba, the triumphant march to Paris, the shouts of Vive l'Empereur. Napoleon has returned. But destiny waits at a small Belgian town called Waterloo. Breathe slowly, and picture the spring of 1815. Napoleon has returned from exile. Paris has erupted in cheers, and Europe trembles at the sound of his name once more. The 100 days have begun, and the Emperor knows he has little time. His enemies are marching from all sides, determined to crush him before his power can solidify. He gathers his veterans, the old guard, the young conscripts, the loyal marshals who still believe. One last campaign will decide it all. His plan is bold. He will strike quickly into Belgium, defeat the British under Wellington and the Prussians under Blücher before they can unite, and force peace on his own terms. Once again, Napoleon moves with speed, his army sweeping north like a storm. Breathe deeply and imagine the fields of Belgium in June. Green hills, scattered farms, muddy roads churned by marching boots and iron wheels. The French army is full of confidence, their banners high, their emperor riding among them. They believe, as they always have, that where Napoleon leads, victory follows. On June 18, 1815, they meet their fate at Waterloo. The battlefield stretches wide, rolling fields divided by hedges, farms, and muddy lanes. Wellington's army holds the high ground, his red-coated soldiers steady, his artillery placed with care. Napoleon attacks with thunder, cannons roar, cavalry charge, infantry advance in columns, drums beating, flags snapping in the wind. The French strike again and again, but the British squares hold firm, bayonets bristling, muskets firing in deadly rhythm. Breathe slowly, and picture the great cavalry charges, wave after wave of French horsemen thundering across the field. The ground shakes beneath them, their sabres gleam, but they crash upon the British squares like waves against rock, broken and driven back. Still, Napoleon pushes on, determined to break them. By afternoon, the battle rages fiercely, victory still uncertain. Then comes disaster. The Prussian army, led by Blücher, arrives on the field. Their columns march in from the east, fresh and determined. Napoleon now faces two armies at once. His men fight with courage, but exhaustion and numbers weigh them down. At last, in desperation, he unleashes his final reserve, the Imperial Guard, his most loyal, his most feared. The Guard advances in silence, their tall bearskin hats looming, their step steady. All of France's hope rests on them. But as they climb the ridge toward the British line, musket fire erupts, cannon thunder, smoke thickens. They falter, then break. The cry spreads, "La Garde recule!" The Guard is retreating, panic follows. The French army collapses into chaos. Waterloo is lost. Breathe deeply and picture Napoleon watching as his army dissolves before his eyes. His cloak whips in the wind, his face pale, his dreams shattering. For the first time, he knows it is truly over. Within days, he abdicates again. This time there will be no Elba. The Allies will not risk another return. They send him far away, across the ocean, to a lonely island in the South Atlantic, St. Helena. St. Helena is barren, windswept, a prison in the middle of endless seas. Napoleon arrives in October 1815, escorted by British ships, watched closely by guards. He is only 46, still vigorous, still sharp, but his world has shrunk to a few miles of rock and sea. Breathe slowly and imagine Longwood House, his residence on the island. Damp walls, leaky roofs, winds howling through the night. The Emperor of Europe now paces small rooms, dictating memoirs to his companions, walking in gardens, gazing at the horizon. His health declines, his stomach plagued by pain, his body weakening, but his mind burns still. He speaks often of his past, of his battles, of his vision. He justifies, defends, explains. He tells his story so that the world will remember not the exile, but the glory. History, he says, is the version of past events that people have decided to agree upon, and he intends to shape that version. Years pass, the world moves on. In Paris, kings rule again, but Napoleon's shadow lingers. Soldiers whisper of him, peasants dream of him, his name spreads like a legend. In 1821, at the age of 51, his body finally gives way. On May 5th, Napoleon Bonaparte dies on St. Helena, far from the land he once ruled. His last words are whispered, France, the army, Josephine. Breathe deeply and imagine his small funeral on the island, the coffin lowered into the earth, the sound of the ocean beyond. A simple grave, marked by stone, holds the man who once held Europe in his hand. But death does not end his story. In time, his remains are returned to Paris, carried with ceremony, laid to rest beneath the golden dome of Les Invalides. There, he lies still, his tomb vast and solemn, a place of pilgrimage for those who still feel the pull of his legend. His legacy endures. The Napoleonic Code shapes laws across the world. His military genius is studied in academies centuries later. His rise from obscure Corsican boy to Emperor of Europe remains one of history's greatest stories. Loved and hated, admired and condemned, Napoleon is never forgotten. Breathe slowly and let the image settle. The boy in Ajaccio, the general at Austerlitz, the emperor at Notre Dame, the exile at St. Helena. His life is a tale of ambition, brilliance, triumph, and tragedy. His name echoes still, whispered in history's halls. Now let your breath slow. The story of Napoleon Bonaparte has ended, but its echo drifts softly, like the sea breeze over St. Helena, carrying his memory into eternity. Before you drift fully into sleep, don't forget to check out the other stories on this channel. There are many more journeys into history waiting for you, and if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe. It really helps this channel grow, and it means you'll never miss the next tale